So Samurai, you fancy a trip into space, do you? In Cyberpunk 2077 lore, a group you should become intimately familiar with are the Highriders. Highriders, Earthside slang used to describe those born or who spend most of their time working in space. Highriders who have been born outside of the gravity well share several common traits, and most share a genetic heritage towards greater tolerance to zero-G, low air pressure and radiation. This genetic dominance can be directly linked to the actions of the European Space Agency Highroute, which biased the orbital gene pool towards a large proportion of African-based stock, almost 68%. The European Space Agency, aka the ESA, wanted cheap labour, and thus recruited millions of workers from African townships. The population would increase exponentially in space due to the high birth rates. So, in a twist of fate, the ESA created the Highriders and in turn made Africa into an exceptionally powerful entity. Once a fractured continent of warring countries under a bewildering array of dictators, democracies and social states, the new Africa was born as Euranations negotiated with the scattered nations to build the Kilimanjaro mass driver. The African states have since established solid footholds in space. Most spaceport facilities and construction areas are on African soil. With Highrider support, this new assembly remained relatively neutral in the time of the Red, ready to deal with all sides of their sovereignty and control of space is respected. While this is not quite the equivalent of Wakanda in sub-Saharan Africa from the Marvel universe, as some subscribers had hoped for, Africa has serendipitously become the most powerful force in space, and has enough firepower to effectively hold its own against any country or mega corporation. Prior to the Highriders, the single most powerful force in space, the ESA, was an outgrowth of an economic consortium of European nations. The ESA established its dominance in space travel due to its innovative Hermes 2 spaceplane, which subsequently laid the foundations for the Orbital Air Corporation. Orbital Air specialized in cargo and passenger transport within Earth's orbit and maintenance of commercial orbital facilities. Orbital Air quickly monopolized the industry with its fleet of French-made Hermes spaceplanes and through recruiting millions of workers from African nations in an event known as the ESA Highroute. The ESA has built two permanent bases on Luna, Tycho and Copernicus. The largest maintains two known mass drivers used to transport lunar rock out to ESA's L5 constructions, such as O'Neill 1. Copernicus is an impact crater on the Moon, an eponym for Polish astronomer Nicholas Copernicus, located in Eastern Oceanus Procellarum, which is Latin for Ocean of Storms. Tycho is another crater located in the southern lunar highlands, an eponym from Danish astronomer Tycho Brahe. Luna was easier to colonize than open space. Gravity already existed, and the ability to soft land machinery has been possible since the early 1970s. With the use of fission-powered heat drills, it was relatively simple to fuse the silicate lunar soil into glass-like tunnels. Pockets of buried ice were mined for air and water, while plants were brought in to create a viable ecosystem. Both cities are constructed underground using a combination of blasting and nuclear-powered heat smelters. An extensive warren of heat-fused tunnels open into central park-like caverns. These caverns are topped with geodesic pressure domes. Besides creating open space for lunar colonists, these open areas also provide most of the air and recycling capacities. An agglomeration of solar collectors provides the raw energy needed for terraforming purposes. The mile-long tracks of the Tycho and Copernicus mass drivers buried deep within the crater rock, a dark reminder of a time when the ESA utilized them to hurl rocks at Earth during the short-lived Euro-American conflict in 2008. The L-zones, or Lagrange points, occupy stable positions relative to Earth and Luna, making them perfect for self-contained bases, factories and construction sites. At L1 there is the Crystal Palace, ESA's premier space colony which serves as a playground for the ultra-rich. The Crystal Palace is a fire-toroidal ring structure built around a large core extending for 1 mile through the center of the station. Looming just beyond at L5 is the O'Neill 1, the titanic microplanet which spans around 20 kilometers. Ablaze with light, it is attended by a myriad of construction androids and automated factories. Paradise Station is at L4 and Galileo Cylinder at L3. Behind the Moon at L2 resides ESA's testbed cylinder and Deep Space Explorer Doc. O'Neill 1 is a reference to American physicist Gerard Kitchen O'Neill. He invented a magnetic launcher called the Mass Drive and wrote extensively on the possibility of human settlements in outer space. Remember the ESA hideout? Well, this allowed orbital air to expand rapidly. It resulted in 68% of the space population originating from Africa. They became increasingly hostile to interference from Earth. The Highriders eventually revolted against the ESA due to overcrowded living conditions and substandard working environments. The O'Neill Wars followed, during which ESA lost control of O'Neill 1 and the Galileo cylinder. The US and Japan would officially recognize the new Highrider government. Although the ESA technically owns the Crystal Palace, it is in fact used by all space-capable nations, each of which maintains an embassy on the space station. Living space is leased by the ESA to the highest bidders on a 20-year renewable basis. In turn, the ESA maintains energy services, general security and station upkeep. Police services and law enforcement are the exclusive province of Interpol. The intra-European police organization, under an agreement with the ESA, reserves the right of judicial power over criminal offences. While mankind's ability to travel beyond the Earth lunar systems is tenuous at best, both ESA and their main rival NASA have set up bases on Mars at Asidius Planitia and Christia Planitia respectively. As for the Highriders, a strong orbital culture pervades their society. Institutions such as manhood rituals and rites of passage exist throughout the orbital zone and extend into the colonies on Luna and Mars. There is an extensive oral history in orbit. Highriders are fond of telling stories and legends and have constructed entirely new mythologies based on life in space. Although these mythologies were not described within the lore, these cultural identifications have, to some extent, been absorbed even in the technician and managerial classes, expanding from their original African roots to encompass Asian and European legends. Their cultures thus combine the best of African, Asian and European styles with bold colours and vibrant exotic urgency. The space environment is dangerous. Highriders tend to be fast reacting and level-headed or dead. Highriders are usually well educated in isolated work shacks and construction projects. There is little to do but read or talk. Space is crowded and work shacks usually don't provide much in the way of privacy. Like the Japanese, the Highriders have evolved many social conventions to help create a sense of privacy. For an outsider, this can lead to some uncomfortable situations. In space, there are no nudity taboos, but it is considered rude to stare while someone is undressed. Highriders are slow to anger, but are extremely nasty when riled. For example, violate a pressure seal, firing a gun inside a habitat, or engaging in nefarious behavior like a space rat is not tolerated. Within the cultural groups, there are close bonds, and a Highrider will always back up another Highrider in need. Most Highriders prefer martial arts and melee combat and disdain guns due to the risks involved. What about drugs and alcohol? An alcoholic Highrider is a dead Highrider. Same goes for abuse of illegal substances. These substances can blur your reactions and slow your reflexes, which can kill you quickly in space. Highriders also do not smoke. Smoking can have negative impacts on air filtration systems and electronics. That is not to suggest there are no stimulants, but rather than achieve a high, they are often used as reflex boosters or intelligence enhancers. The number one addiction is brain dance. As for Cyberpunk 2077, the law allows CDPR to explore potential space missions, albeit I suspect if this does come to pass, it would probably be DLC. The question that arises is what part of space? A scene in a previous trailer may pertain to an orbital air Hermes plane leaving Earth's atmosphere, but that does not necessarily equate to visiting the lunar cities or a space station. I envisage a mission to the Crystal Palace would certainly be an enticing prospect, no doubt, with the treasures to satiate desires both subtle and gross. Quite a few orbital Highriders, aka Delta Jocks, also run their own suborbital scramjets to transport interesting cargo, which could also provide fertile ground for quest material. Finally, the Night City lexicon is rich with slang, so unsurprisingly, Highriders have some of their own. Notable words from Highrider culture include dirt sniffer is a ground cider, someone who is rarely in space. To dock means to copulate with someone. Cranston, to become violently spacey. For example, when we hit Leo, that dirt-sniffing street rat pulled a Cranston maneuver. Thank you for chipping in.